What's the most wildly inaccurate thing your child has ever been taught? My daughter's teacher gave her a failing grade for scientifically proving that human blood isn't blue. My daughter, Lily, came home from 4th grade, excitedly showing me the blue veins in her wrist. She confidently announced that blood is completely blue inside the human body and only turns red when it hits oxygen. I am a seasoned ER nurse at Mercy General Hospital. I gently corrected her, explaining that blood is always red because of hemoglobin. It's just a darker shade inside our veins. Lily looked utterly confused. She told me her teacher, Mrs. Wilson, had presented a massive PowerPoint and showed official diagrams from their science book proving it was blue. The next morning, I packed my work scrubs. I sent Mrs. Wilson a polite email asking if I could do a quick 15-minute presentation about the circulatory system for career day that afternoon. She enthusiastically agreed. When I arrived, 28 kids stared up at me. I started by addressing the blue blood theory. The entire class nodded that they had just learned this fact. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a vacutainer blood collection tube. I explained that this tube contains an absolute vacuum. When we draw blood at the hospital, the blood never touches a single drop of oxygen until we pop the cap off in the lab. Then, I pulled up my tablet and showed them photos of sealed tubes. The blood inside was dark, unmistakably red. The kids were absolutely mesmerized. Miss Wilson, however, was violently clearing her throat, her face turning redder than the samples on my screen. One boy raised his hand and argued that their textbook explicitly said it was blue. I walked over, flipped his book open, and checked the publication date. It was from 1998. I gently explained to the class that medicine updates fast, and we used to believe things that turned out to be scientifically wrong. Mrs. Wilson abruptly stood up, loudly clapping her hands. Well, thank you for that interesting presentation, Mr. Johnson, but we need to move on to math now. As I packed up, a girl raised her hand and asked, "So our textbook is wrong?" The class erupted in whispers. Mrs. Wilson's voice got incredibly tight. "The curriculum says," "Actually," I interrupted, pulling up the state science standards on my phone. "The current curriculum specifically mentions the blue blood myth as a misconception that needs to be corrected." That's when Mrs. Wilson angrily asked me to step into the hallway. The second the door closed, she hissed at me. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to teach when parents constantly undermine my authority? Now they'll question everything I say." "Isn't that exactly what we want?" I asked calmly. "For them to question things and learn critical thinking?" "I've been teaching for 22 years, she snapped. "I'm not changing my entire curriculum because some nurse thinks he knows better than our textbooks." The retaliation was swift and petty. The very next day, Mrs. Wilson announced a pop quiz. One of the questions was, "What color is blood inside the body?" Lily wrote, "Red." Mrs. Wilson marked it wrong and gave my 9-year-old daughter a massive red F. Lily came home sobbing. The following morning, I marched into the school and slammed a folder down on Principal Davis's desk. It contained medical textbooks, the updated state science standards, and Lily's completely unfair quiz. Principal Davis called Mrs. Wilson into the office. When confronted with the undeniable medical evidence, Mrs. Wilson stubbornly crossed her arms. "This is how I've always taught it," she insisted. "But is it correct?" the principal asked. After a long, painful pause, Mrs. Wilson muttered, "It's what the children understand better." I completely lost my temper. I demanded to know why my daughter was crying before school because she was terrified of being punished for writing down the scientific truth. The fallout was massive. 6 weeks later, the school district finally threw out the outdated 1998 science books. Mrs. Wilson was formally required to attend mandatory professional development classes on current scientific standards. On Lily's next report card, Mrs. Wilson passively-aggressively wrote, "Excellent critical thinking skills." She completely refused to look me in the eye during the parent-teacher conference, and when I signed up to help run the spring science fair, I noticed my name had been mysteriously crossed off the volunteer list with a black marker. I don't care. Now, whenever Lily learns a new fact at school, she comes home, looks at me, and asks, "Dad, is this actually true, or is it just a Mrs. Wilson?"